Thank you for joining us today. I call the September 12th, 2024 meeting of the Police Advisory and Oversight Board to order. We will start with an introduction of commission members.
Lucretia King.
Dave Hoganson.
Tanya Graywind.
Conrad Thomas.
Joanna Johnson.
All right. The first thing on the agenda today is approving the agenda. So can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you.
I second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. I don't think anybody was opposed. Motion carried. The next item is approving the minutes. So can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the August 8th, 2024 meeting, please?
I motion to approve.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carried. The next item that we have on our agenda tonight is a brown bag reschedule. So we had some conflicts with the brown bag that was scheduled in August, and so we need to discuss a new date that would work for everybody. Do we have any suggestions for times or dates from the police department? I think your schedule might be.
Your mic's off.
I guess what month are we thinking? Are we looking at October at this juncture, or?
October or
I was thinking October, maybe.
October.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have, we wanted to work on setting some agenda items, and so I think it would be helpful to have it sooner than later.
Sure. So our regular October meeting is the 10th. So 2 weeks out would be the 24th. So it is a 5-week or a 5 Thursday month. So the 24th or the 31st, I guess, would be
No.
possibilities.
No.
Okay. No to that. Okay.
I
Okay.
can't do either one of those days.
Okay.
Okay. Then that ends October.
I could do the 17th or the 3rd.
Yeah, 17th, we'll be at the ICP conference in Boston. Zach Robinson's a finalist for the Officer of the Year award there, so I won't be here.
Okay.
But I could certainly find a replacement for myself if that's a date that works for everybody else.
The 17th actually does not work for me in the month. I think every other day would, but.
What we can, well, I don't know if that works or not. I was going to suggest I could have my exec assistant push out a doodle poll
That would be
for all the
wonderful.
members, and then we would just have to, at our next meeting on the 10th, we could solidify the date because we won't get it before that, right?
That'd
Does
be
that work?
perfect.
Okay. So I'll have Kelsey send that out to all of you tomorrow, so look for that, and it'll have a variety of, I guess, dates or times. We'll try and figure that out.
That works great. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Moving on to the next item, we have public comment. Those who wish to address the Police Advisory and Oversight Board must use the sign-in sheet. Speakers must state their name and will be limited to 3 minutes. Comments should not contain profanity or personal attacks. I know we do have one person signed up, Sarah Alta Peter, thank you. So, please,
Is she going to have a mic, or you want her
I
to?
think, can she go up in the,
Yeah. Okay.
Hello?
Yeah.
Is it on? Okay. Please bear with me. This is a public invoking, and you guys know me from last December. I spoke. Hello, my name is Sarah Alta Peter. For the last year, I have been the victim of the most extreme corruption this advisory board will ever hear about. Constance Cleveland and Stephanie Hayden have used the court to retaliate against myself for exposing the sexual relationship between Steele County State's Attorney Charles Allen Stock and Alana Knorr, formerly Alana Norberg, while he represented her. I worked for her and I witnessed the conspiracy to complete judicial misconduct against John Norberg by Constance Cleveland and Alana Knorr. In 2021, they planned to close up the cases prior to Cleveland becoming a judge. Within months of Cleveland becoming a judge, they did exactly that. And she defied collateral estoppel and committed judicial misconduct. There was a murder-suicide threat at the courthouse the day I was exposed in Cleveland in front of Judge Tristan Vanderstreek. No investigation by the police, the sheriffs, the BCI, nobody. I had a video of a district court judge chasing me down the interstate. Well, she was a judge on 3 cases that I was a party. I called dispatch. I left a message on the supervisor's line. I even emailed Mary Hughes the video and asked her to please have somebody contact me because I wanted to press charges. Nobody called. Throughout the end of 2023, my ex-husband was allowed to repeatedly come to my house and harass me after the Department of Justice Domestic Violence Program rescued myself and my children from his domestic violence. Joanna Johnson was my provider. She treated me for narcissistic abuse and helped me recover from it for 6 years. Lieutenant Matheson made a report that stated, "We have let Alta Peter know this is civil and the Fargo Police Department will not help her." Repeatedly, he came screaming, yelling, swearing, scaring the children, making threats, and was putting our housing in danger. He even did it while I was on a telehealth meeting with Joanna Johnson while my daughter was in school, and it was not a visitation day. And they said that was not harassment and it was not a crime. Every time I see him, I go into PTSD state. I have to relive everything he did to us, and he was already deemed an abuser by the Department of Justice, wasn't he? So why should he be able to come to my house every day? The chief failed our family, and his actions were led by ex partes with Cleveland to repetitively refer myself back to the court in which Cleveland was using to retaliate. Cleveland stated that any allegation of abuse was absurd. That was horrifying. And assistance in domestic abuse and child neglect and endangerment. When I was calling to report what my ex-husband was doing, the officers would say they had to take a call from their supervisor and then would call me back and say, "This is a civil matter. There's nothing we can do for you." I have been requesting the child neglect police report for 9 months. In fact, my request stated all records between myself and my ex-husband from 2016 to 2024. I received a few of those, and the rest I received were about my stalker. I paid $50 for reports that were not what I requested and desperately.
Ms. Altapeter, your time is up. Thank you for taking the time to make comment. All right, the next item that we have on our agenda for tonight is questions from the community members.
I demand the termination of the chief for his involvement in the corruption. He had his hands right in it. I have not got reports for 9 months.
I'd like to call to order the meeting. Thank you. Questions from the community members. So the question that was identified this week was, this month, does the department collect DNA, and what is the training and how large is the database?
Hello,
Thank you.
am I on? All right, so I'm filling in for Lieutenant Travis Mosier, who had something come up, so I'll do my best to get through this, but it's something that I know quite a bit about, so I don't think it's gonna be too difficult. So, community question, does the Fargo Police Department collect DNA? What is the training for collection of DNA, and how long is the DNA database that the Fargo Police Department maintains, or how large is it, I should say? Thank you. So yes, the Fargo Police Department does collect DNA since January 1st of 2023. These are the following numbers and different types of items that the Fargo Police Department has pulled for DNA. So 322 biological items, so biological meaning like blood, saliva, sweat, etc. There was 579 trace evidence DNA, so kind of a touch DNA. So if anybody would think of me touching here, you could get pull touch DNA off of that. Another example would be like a stolen vehicle where they would take touch DNA off of the steering wheel or different parts of the car that they may have touched. 96 SANE kits, so those are sexual assault kits that are done by a professional inside of a hospital that is trained to do that. 90 clothing items for biological DNA. 13 household items, so such as like screwdrivers or hammers, and 7 weapons that are non-firearms. So those are the pieces of evidence that we did collect DNA off of, and the numbers. As far as training, so in the criminal investigations unit, we have detectives and investigators, and they are all trained in the collection of DNA. along with all of our crime scene investigators and neighborhood services. We have approximately 30 of them. So there are 30 officers that are trained specifically for scene evidence collection. And during their training, they focus on many different things, but the collection of DNA is definitely one of the things that they're trained in, and they do quite frequently. The training is 3 days, 24 hours, and is taught by detectives within our CIU unit. So the database, that's something that we don't actually have. That is actually a database that's kept by the North Dakota State Crime Lab. Fargo submits all of our DNA evidence to that North Dakota State Lab. Under North Dakota Century Code is kind of where it covers that. An individual, or I should say, covers when DNA can be taken from a specific individual who was arrested for specific crimes. So North Dakota Century Code 311303, number 1, an individual 18 years of age or over who is arrested or summoned to appear before a magistrate for the commission of a felony shall provide to the law enforcement officer or correction personnel at the time of the individual's arrest or appearance or upon booking into a correctional facility a sample of blood or other bodily fluid for DNA law enforcement identification purposes and inclusion into the law enforcement identification database. So to put that in kind of terms that maybe is a little bit easier to understand, if you're arrested for a felony that that qualifies for DNA to be collected, the jails generally will collect that DNA and put that on file. Any questions on that portion of it?
Just a quick question in terms of, is there any consent between the person that you're collecting that DNA? Is there any type of procedures of things that they have to, their rights and that's associated with that?
So I guess it would determine on the situation that you're speaking of. So if, let's say there was something that occurred in this room and I have to lawfully be able to be in this room as a law enforcement officer. So let's say it was a crime where I wanted to collect any type of evidence. I would need a warrant or consent to go inside that specific space to collect that DNA. If it's from an individual, then again, we would also want to do a warrant in that case. Here, in this sense, when they're arrested for the felony, that's collected according to law. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So is that typical, once they're arrested and in jail, then would that not, a member of the PD wouldn't do that, but that would be a member of the jail staff?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, they generally, when they're arrested for felons, it wouldn't be our CSIs or officers that would collect that DNA evidence. It would be definitely somebody from the county. I wouldn't say that it would have to be, but that's the common practice here.
And could I just have you clarify one thing? You were saying touch DNA.
Yeah.
I just thought that was kind of interesting. So I've always thought of like touch fingerprints, but like you're actually able to lift DNA, or is it fingerprints? I mean, it's true like skin sloughing of cells? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, again, I'm not an expert on DNA collection, but I will tell you this, that, yeah, touch DNA, I'll give you an example of when I, as a patrol sergeant or somebody, would call for that to be collected, and it's generally, we'll just use the example of a stolen vehicle. That's something where I may want to have touch DNA. We find the vehicle, it's abandoned, it's left unlocked. We will call and have someone do touch DNA on, like, say, the steering wheel, the shifter, maybe the entry point of the vehicle, different areas where we know it's common for individuals who may have stolen that vehicle to leave touch DNA. So yes, it doesn't have to be just a fingerprint. DNA can come from any part of the body, to include saliva and different things like that, biological.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it did, thank you.
Okay. DNA through the years has proven to be something that has solved some of our cases, and we just wanted to use a success story here. So between the years of 2003 and 2013 and 2016, we had a string of sexual assaults in the city of Fargo. We had 3 different female victims. All of the 3 victims did complete SANE kits. So what we had talked about, that's collected by a professional nurse inside of a medical facility upon them allowing us to do that. All 3 kits were sent to the North Dakota State Lab and were submitted into the Combined DNA Index System, so CODIS. And when we talked about the collection of DNA by specific felons for specific crimes, so in 2019, the suspect of these 3 sexual assaults was arrested for a felony in California, and his DNA was collected and submitted to CODIS. And from that DNA, we were able to identify him as the suspect, and he was charged and convicted in Cass County District Court for those 3 sexual assaults. So that's kind of a success from the DNA that we thought we would showcase for you.
How wide and broad is that CODIS system? Is that just the US, or is it North America? Is it, how far does that cover?
I wouldn't know the answer to that exactly, Chief.
Yeah, the CODIS system is US, nationally. Yep, so that's the national database, and they have particular standards and requirements within their system, but also by law in terms of accepting samples into the CODIS system. So there's multiple layers. There's a state database, and then there's CODIS, which is national. And to your question about collecting it, the DNA samples have to be lawfully collected in order to be entered into the system. So whether it's by consent or a warrant, or if you discard something in public even, if you abandon property, like let's say you blow your nose, and you discard that, we can collect that lawfully. It's abandoned property. We've solved some cases even in Milwaukee in that fashion. In fact, we solved a pretty big string of cold case homicides through that very means many years back. So there are several ways in which we can lawfully obtain DNA sampling, but it has to be done lawfully under any of the requirements or exceptions. And I guess one other piece, as long as we're talking about this, I wanted to bring up your sexual assault example. Really good opportunity for, the public and those watching to realize, well, we know how significant and traumatic sexual assault crimes are, and sometimes victims are hesitant to report them, or they don't go into the hospital right away. A SANE kit, sexual assault nursing exam, and that's what SANE stands for. So that's a specialized nurse who is trained in collecting DNA data or DNA evidence from victims of sexual assault, and male, female, children, and that evidence is oftentimes very significant in convicting and identifying suspects for those heinous crimes. And we want to, again, encourage our community members, if they've been a victim of this, not to be hesitant to report it. Sometimes it takes them some time before they can report it. That doesn't mean that all evidence is potentially lost. And SANE kit's, I think, an important piece, but there's also other evidence that as an investigator talks to folks, they can identify in which we might get DNA and help solve that crime. So just a really important community public safety ad or message, I guess, from that perspective.
Does the North Dakota Crime Lab do they process all those SANE kits? Is that just
Yes.
that? Okay.
Yes, we send everything, and this is all by statute, and every state has it this way, where their evidence is processed at their state lab. And then they have to follow all of their scientific requirements. So each crime lab in the U.S. Has a national accreditation in order for them to continue to perform scientific examinations and analysis. They've added their fingerprint examiner back. For a few years, they had actually no fingerprint examining capability, latent prints, because they had lost staff and they hadn't replaced them. So one of the things that Drew Wrigley did when he got in office, we brought this to his attention, and also firearms examination was another staffing issue that had lapsed at the crime lab. And so we had little to no ability to get latent prints examined or firearms examined, and that's now been brought back, and the lab is getting those people on board. And then once they're on board, our department, we've got, at last I checked, about 200 latent prints that we would like to submit for exam. We got to make sure they're not outside the statute of limitations anymore, but we'll still have significant latent prints to also submit. So prints are still good, DNA are still good. You can get DNA and fingerprint from the same object. The science has really evolved over the years, and it's amazing what they can do. And just a little bit more on touch DNA. It's touch DNA because you're touching something. The best DNA is from body fluids, saliva, blood, semen, other bodily fluids, sweat, etc. So we had, in fact, we've had a robbery here within the last couple of years where we recovered the mask, and that DNA was matched to the suspect DNA. So, I mean, there's all types of applications for that.
I know it was some time ago, the same kits were backed up. Was that staffing, and are they all caught up on those
At the
now?
crime lab, yeah. I believe that they have alleviated that backlog. I couldn't say for certain, but we tracked that pretty closely. Sexual assault was one of the areas that Captain Alfelt and the Criminal Investigations Division over the last 2 years have given a larger sense of urgency to, and that was one of the pieces, the same kit. So I think they are caught up, although there's a turnaround time to all of that work, which could be 30 to 60 days.
I have a question. And how long does the DNA samples last that you collect?
The ones that get entered into CODIS, yeah, they stay there. They don't take them out. They stay there. And so if you have a perfect example, right? So we had a string of unsolved sexual assaults. The first one was in 2013. So 6 years later, this individual was arrested, and many states have DNA collection at arrest or DNA collection at conviction. Probably most of them do now. And so that sample now that's collected by law in California or by law in North Dakota gets entered into CODIS, and it runs through multiple databases. It might run through a known person database if we're trying to confirm that this DNA belongs to the person we've arrested, or in this case, to the unsolved DNA case logs. And it'll run through all of that, and it could match it to, like it did, it matched it to these unsolved sexual assaults, which ultimately solved the case. It could also add another one to the string of unknown and say, well, if it was collected not from a person, because we know who it was. But yeah, that CODIS database stays in there.
Yeah, I think they actually had a documentary film about that in Fargo. It was at the Fargo Film Festival.
Very cool. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda is police department updates.
Okay, a couple of updates here. I'll get my notes. A couple of, interesting pieces that we've been talking about. Our traffic safety team has started to roll out this week, so they're out on the street, not at complete full force, but they will be by the end of the year, really addressing the dangerous driving and all of that. So we're kind of excited about that. While that was going on, we've updated Policy 500, Traffic Function and Responsibility, which goes directly to some of our prior conversations about issuance of citations and tracking citations. And so what we've done in the interim was change our policy to require that our officers issue all traffic citations through the TRAX system that is in the squad car. So now there's no handwritten tickets and something that you can't read and you can't decipher. So everything gets electronically entered in, and also we track all warnings. So unless the officer is called away for an emergency, if they make a traffic stop, someone's going to get a citation, whether it's an actual citation with a fine or a written warning citation, and that will be logged in the system. That will also help us track some of these other nuisance vehicles issues where we've stopped someone 1 million times for the loud muffler. Maybe they've gotten a number of warnings, and now we're just going to start issuing citations. And ultimately, we have the ability to recommend registration suspension to the state on those types of cases. The other part that we added in was the inclusion of race and sex. That's not required in the track system, so just as an FYI, the state system is set up that way, but we were able to ask them to allow us to enter that in so that we can track race and gender data. And again, the officers are doing that to the best of their ability, as you know, from some of our prior conversations with a variety of different ethnicities. It's sometimes hard to determine. We don't have an ethnicity identifier, right? So you've got black, white, Hispanic, non-Hispanic, Native American, and I think Pacific Islander, right? So you've got those are your only options. So to the best of their ability, because we can't obviously ask people that, and the ethnicity. You know, if you're looking at stopping someone who's a Bosnian, The officer could characterize them as white, he could characterize them as black. I mean, it depends much on their complexion. It could be different from person to person. So just so that everyone has that understanding, but we'll start to be able to aggregate that data as well for future conversations and review. But that's just went into effect last week.
Chief, can you speak to what is the purpose of why tracking the race or the ethnicity of those who are stopped?
Well, I think in our, many of our conversations and sometimes also community concern in terms of profiling and things of that nature, and as we've discussed, the traffic demographics or population demographics are not a valid metric in which to measure against traffic stops. The research is out on that, but I think it still gives the community some comfort knowing that we're tracking that, and certainly if we identify patterns of behavior by officers, that may be part of something that would initiate further review or investigation. And that would play into our personnel complaint piece, but first, of course, we have to have the data to work with. So we've got that part accomplished, and going forward, we'll have that to look at and discuss.
Good, so it could be used as a positive.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we could, you know, the one big thing that I think was missing, I think that's an important piece, but not having the warning tickets in there is a huge piece that we're missing in a number of ways, because, you know, the officers make a lot of stops and may give a lot of warnings, and you don't have any of that information, right? And so, if nothing else, it takes away the perception of the reality that someone is doing something inappropriate in traffic stops, right? You know, if I'm doing that, I guess giving everyone a warning affords me the opportunity to slide under the radar. So, if nothing else, I think it helps assure the community from a trust, transparency perspective that all of this is being tracked, not just for general data, but patterns and I guess to discourage inappropriate behavior.
Okay.
That completes my updates.
All right. Any other questions? All right, the next item that we have on our agenda is a presentation regarding school resource officers.
So again, that was going to be provided by the Lieutenant Mosier. I've looked over the PowerPoint a little bit. I've worked in specialized services for quite a while, so if you're okay with me giving the presentation, I'll do so. I'll do my best to answer the questions that you have. Since it is an agenda item, I'd be willing to do that for you. Is that
Yes.
something you'd like?
Yeah,
Okay,
is that
all right, okay.
Appropriate? Thank you.
You bet.
One other piece, while he's getting ready. The policy update will be on our website, should be sometime early next week, so it hasn't been updated yet, but it'll be updated on there as soon as our comms team can get that accomplished.
Did we ever hear anything from the cops people? Did we get a report on that yet?
Oh, yeah, yeah, I could give you a little update on that. So we've got, on the use of force policy, yes, thank you. That could be part of the update. We'll extend a little bit. They have looked at the policy. Captain Helmick worked with them as the point of contact. He's got, I've got to review his report. He's made a recommendation, but in short, they found our policy that really basically cover all of the best practices, and they had one or two maybe suggestions that could be done or could not be done, but none of which, from what in talking to Captain Helmick, seems significant in any way, but I could certainly let you know what those were and have that discussion. We can do that at the next meeting. I will make sure that I put that down.
Cops, like a presentation on it, or is it?
I think I might just cover it here and maybe have some copies or something, and we can go over what the suggestions were and what their input was.
This was the initial one? This wasn't
This was the use of force policy review, which
Okay.
was, yes, initially. So the larger critical incident response piece probably won't be ready, we won't have the report, we don't think, till at least the end of the year.
Okay.
But they're working on it.
Thank you.
Ready? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
All right, Fargo Police Department School Resource Officer Program, when we had our agenda-setting meeting, I know with a lot of current events, that was kind of a topic that we thought we would really touch on. So I'll do my best to kind of explain the structure of what we do, the responsibilities and roles of a school resource officer, educational instruction that they provide inside the schools, unified response to active threats. So that's kind of how a plan that we've put together that not only we follow, but the schools will follow. The chief has been a big proponent of making sure that we have that all put together. And then the West Fargo and Fargo Public Schools efforts as they have them. At any point during the presentation, if you have questions, just feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to answer them for you. So the structure-wise, it is under the Specialized Services Unit. So it currently has a lieutenant, which is Lieutenant Mosier. There's one sergeant in charge of that, which is Sergeant Nick Chunnis, and there's 7 school resource officers. The Fargo Public Schools that have SROs are not all of them, but it is Fargo North, Fargo South, Davies, Dakota, Ben Franklin Middle School, Carl Ben Eielson Middle School, Discovery Middle School. And then there's 14 elementary schools that are not currently covered by SROs, but they do receive SRO support when needed. An example would be if they did have something that occurred, or they did need some schooling or training done in those schools. The officers that are assigned to the middle schools and the high schools will generally fill those gaps. If it's not, it would be the sergeant, so Sergeant Chunnis in this case. So the roles and responsibilities of a school resource officer, first and foremost, it's going to be school safety. So I know, just to speak a little bit on that, the officers are usually asked to be there before students arrive and try to stay until after they've left. So school safety is definitely paramount when it comes to their responsibilities. Resource to school administration when it comes to criminal matters. So just like we've advised the board on specific things that may be civil or not criminal or whatnot, they can advise administration on what is criminal and what isn't, and then kind of help them guide through that. I know with several of the changes within North Dakota, juvenile laws have changed as that's gone through. So it's again kind of working through some of those intricacies of that. Reduce violence in schools. They can do that by just talking. They can do that by one of the neatest things I've spoken to school resource officers about, and they've said is kind of a fun thing that they get to do, is get to know individual students. And just like I've had opportunities to meet with all of you folks for 6 months now, you can kind of see a demeanor that's in specific individuals and myself. So they get to know these students pretty well, and they can see when things are getting a little bit squirrely or not, or so they're really good at reading the room per se, and so they like to try to reduce that violence. And incorporating themselves into these schools, they're able to develop a bond with individuals that they may not have come forward to law enforcement before, but now they do. So reducing school violence in ways like that is a positive thing for them. Be a positive role model for students and staff. So these officers do a really good job with that. They get to work. They are positive when they get to work. They try to work through those interactions with staff. And I know, Joanna, you've talked about the students, making sure that they understand what it is, that it's not just a negative conversation that they have with an officer all the time, but positive ones. Mm-hmm. It's neat to listen to the officers tell stories about that, having positive interactions with individuals that have had negative interactions with officers, and changing the way that they see different officers. I've had emails coming to me with the community engagement team from students that have said, hey, thank this officer for having this conversation with me. I've heard success stories from, hey, do you know SRO so-and-so? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And they're like, tell them that they saved my life, So they do have a very, very positive impact in those schools, and they're a positive role model for a lot of them. Improving relationships between law enforcement and students, I think we already hit on that, right? So they have a unique opportunity to be with kids and individuals inside their schools in maybe a non-authoritative sense. They're able to interact with them. I know they've got different shirts and stuff that they'll wear, polos, to show school spirit in some senses, just to kind of not say get buy-in, but to help them know that they mean what they're saying when they say, hey, we just want to build positive relationships with you. And then one thing they don't do is they do not enforce school policy or behavior issues. So an example of that, if it's a school policy to not have a lock on your locker, I made that up, but as an example, it's their policy, it says you can't have that. That would not be something that they would call a resource officer to actually help with. That would be a school policy. They can stand by if they feel that that is going to not be taken well, but they would just be solely there for protection at that point, in case things were to go the opposite way. So I don't know if there's any questions on roles and responsibilities at this point. Okay, so they also are tasked with some different educational instruction pieces. So topics discussed in school are going to be justification for rules of the law, consequences of a crime. So not every crime, obviously, you go to jail for, but some kids may think that. Some adults may think that. So that's one thing that they talk about. They talk about juvenile and adult criminal justice systems because they are different. You have a juvenile referee in the juvenile court system versus going to the, like say, the Cass County courthouse. So there is just a different system. It's all run by the same government, but it is different. Career opportunities in law enforcement. I have had a couple of people say, yeah, I remember so-and-so as a school resource officer. They're the reason I wanted to become a cop. So that's kind of a neat opportunity for us. Substance abuse prevention to include cigarettes, alcohol, and drugs. You've seen the DARE program. It's not a program that we currently run in Fargo, but they do have that information. So making sure that we can help with substance abuse and prevention. Violence and crime prevention. Attend threat assessment meetings. So they will attend threat assessment meetings at a school. So made up scenario, individuals brings forward a concern or a complaint about a certain student or a certain group of students, or maybe some kind of something posted on social media. They'll go in and they will assess or assist with the assessment of that threat situation. It can even come down as far as an individual not listening in school might be what is happening behind that. So they will be in there and help attend those threat assessment meetings. SROs attend the National Association of School Resource Officers, or NASRO. That's where they get SRO basic and advanced schools. So that's where they get their training. So for me, just to roll out from being an officer on the street, there's different things that happen in the schools and programs and how they work. So they're taught how to deal with different activities in the schools and maybe, say, speak with juveniles in a different sense. So I know that they're always pretty excited when they come back from there to implement the things in the schools that they've learned. So it's kind of neat to see them when they come back from that. It's kind of an honor to go there and learn.
Quick clarification in terms of the educational material.
Yeah.
Is that given to the whole school or is this to individuals?
So they would teach classes based on that.
Okay.
Yep. Good question.
I have a question
Yeah.
based on, piggybacking on that one. When you give a presentation or a class presentation on that, I was wondering, do the officers ever go to the schools just to talk about, I don't know, like even citizen responsibilities and interacting with police officers and, building trust, like, I mean, do you guys go talk to elementary kids ever, like get them used to seeing police officers? Or,
Yeah, that actually becomes a role for all of us within the police department. I kind of ran that with the community engagement team, and we do that. We get a lot of people reach out to us, and we try to make it at as many events as we can. So, for instance, say it's a daycare. It might not be, and I don't want to mean this in a bad sense, but we have to mind our time. So if it's like a daycare with like 2 or 3 kids, we might not be able to make it to that, but if it's something where there's 15 to 20 individuals to speak to, those are going to be more of our engagement areas. We like to work with different resources that are able to bring several students together. So if we can get 2 or 3 daycares that have 2 or 3 individuals within their daycares or a smaller daycare to go to an event where we can speak to them, that's something that that we definitely will try and push them towards or motivate them to do. Or if they're going to have a block party, we can definitely send officers to those. I know in recent past, we would invite individuals to the police picnic. It's kind of a great place to interact with officers, not in a law enforcement sense. I think a lot of you I saw at the police picnic. So it's a great opportunity for us when we're asked as officers, hey, can you come and talk to my child? Can you come and do this? It's not that we don't want to, we may not have the time. So we try to motivate them to come to events such as that.
Thank you.
I've got a question on the threat assessment
Yeah.
meetings. Are those the problems that the school's been facing this fall with some repeated threats? Is the SRO providing support for that, or is that over and above what an SRO would do? And you know, what does that all look like?
I was not here during those threats. I don't know if the chief can grab that one.
Sure. Yeah, no, good question. The SRO does act as their point of contact and advisor, and so we did go through a week or a couple weeks where we had several of these, and we know that many of them are related, and you may have seen or not, but we've elicited the assistance of the FBI, and they responded very quickly. The string of these, most of them involve a large group of kids who don't even live in our state, but are online. And what's common, not just here, but across the country, we're seeing in policing, is that these groups, when they are, one of them is either embarrassed, or maybe one or more of them is pushing things on social media about the other one that's unfavorable or embarrassing, or sometimes it's even photos. They retaliate against that person in like manner, like swatting calls, where now they're sending the police chief. So, and then it evolves into, oh, let's do the bomb threat at the school, and that's very similar to what's happened with our spree over the past week and a half. And so that is very difficult because you've got all these, number one, it's kids, and they're from other places, but the partnership with the FBI was really big there, and I think at least putting a stop to it for the time being, and we'll see what the results of their investigation are, what happens with those groups. But I guess another public safety note to parents really is paying attention to what your kids are doing online, because they may be gaming tonight, and I guess encouraging them, if there's something going on in social media that is illegal, I mean, if someone's sending illicit photos of another person, that's illegal, or somehow trying to extort them, or there's, you know, this thing called sextortion, and all these different things that are happening on social media with kids, that they let their parents know so they can notify the police instead of allowing them to take retaliation on their own. And it's very dangerous. You know, you send the police to a call where you're saying people are armed and they're killing people, or there's a bomb threat at the school. It could result in someone's injury or death just by virtue of, you know, we don't know what we're going to, and we're going to a place, what's the reaction of the people inside? And so, you know, we're of course very cautious on those calls, but we also have to be ready for, is it the real thing? Because we've also seen the real thing. And so it's a very dangerous prank, if you will, from that perspective. But the SRO does act as that point of contact, and the decisions to evacuate are always the schools or the private entity. And so what this did do is open up an opportunity for a discussion with them, but our advice on a secured building like a school is protocol-wise, if you get a threat, you usually have your SMEs, your teachers, certain areas, you walk around an area, do you see anything suspicious? If you don't, I would we wouldn't recommend evacuating. It's their decision, but if there's nothing suspicious and your building's secured, what the other side of the coin could be is that sometimes folks are trying to get the kids out of the building and getting you to evacuate, and now they're in a threatening position. So you really have to weigh all of that. And I don't know if that's something that has been considered, and I think that's where we come in, and the SRO comes in and helping to maybe bring that, what's happening nationally to their plate, so they can consider that before they decide what to do.
And so did I hear right that the problems that we've been having here in Fargo, those aren't originating here locally, they're coming from who knows where?
To this point, and I the FBI's got the investigation, but what I do know about it is that so far, other than, I shouldn't say not everyone lives here, but most of those involved in these latest ones do not live in, not even in the state of North Dakota.
Interesting.
And just to kind of add to what the chief said, when I was spending time with our intelligence unit, there are so many different layers to a threat assessment that people or other members of the police department get involved with. So our intel unit, I wouldn't expect the school resource officer to do all that investigating his or herself. So you really kind of start digging into what is it. They can start monitoring social media. They can start looking at who the person was. Again, bringing in the FBI. So yeah, those threat assessments, they are part of it, mainly because if you think of a school, that person's going to know that school very, very well and know the individuals in it and know what's kind of going on within the school. So they're just a really good resource as part of those threat assessments. Unified response to active threats. So Cass County Unified School Response, or CCUSR. So who's part of that is the Fargo Police Department, West Fargo Police Department, Moorhead Police Department, Cass County, Clay County Sheriff's Departments, and NDSU Police. And standardized training for all area law enforcement when responding to an active threat. And we also train on single person entries on active killer scenarios. So in a nutshell, what this basically means is we definitely, with all of the entities, even across the river and within our area, we train with them. They have plans in place. The agreements are made that if this were to happen, it's kind of like send everybody type of situation. But what we've learned from other things in the past is you can't just send everybody to one location. Maybe it's the plan has to be making sure that you cover your area of responsibility. So we don't need 400 people here. We need 5 people at different areas. So those are the kind of things that they put together, depending on what the situation was. Like the chief had said, in those threat assessments, you don't know if they want them in the school or out, and vice versa. So that's all goes into that training. And then that's standardized across the area. It's one thing in the 20 years that I've been here that I've really appreciated, that 20 years ago, you just responded and you did the best you could. And now we train on it quite frequently on different scenarios. We've used different buildings to make sure that we're sharp, where to enter, how to speak, plain language type of stuff on the radio, the responses that we've got because of our new radio systems, unifying everybody together, being able to communicate with other agencies by dispatch, what they call patching, and they're giving us an LTAC. So that's all been practiced. And then single entries in an active killer scenario, you may be the first individual on scene and you're going to have to go in. I know we used to train in teams, and now it's if you get there, you go. So I don't know if the chief has anything else to add in that sense.
Are you familiar with the Asher training that we just did?
The which one?
The Asher training? Which
No,
is,
that I'm not familiar
okay,
with.
so that's very much a coordinated training with all these entities. We just did that, I think it was in the past couple of weeks. So we really put a sense of urgency in training with all the different entities and making sure that everyone is up to snuff in terms of what we would do in a situation like that. The other things that we have that we've, I think, addressed better is we have a kind of an idiosyncrasy here in Fargo because we have, I believe it's 3 schools that are in the city of Fargo, but they're in the West Fargo School District. So they put a West Fargo SRO in those schools even though they're in the city of Fargo. And so we've reached out to West Fargo and established a more cohesive relationship in terms of that communication and training in events like this, making sure that everyone's on the same page. So that was an identified gap that we have fixed over the course of the last off year, I guess you would say. And we've also just recently updated, Nancy Morris worked on this with the school district attorney and better clarified the memorandum of understanding between the city and the school district in terms of the point that Sean talked about earlier, clarifying that we only enforce laws, we're there for safety and the other relational things that we do, but not enforcing rules and things of that nature. So that's been a push on the federal side, and I think the school district looked at it and asked that we better clarify that. We've always done that, but it's better clarified, and so the new MOU is in place as well.
Thanks, Chief. West Fargo and Fargo Public Schools, what their efforts are is, I know every school is probably a little bit different, but the districts tend to be the same, is they are going to have ongoing training for their staff. West Fargo Public Schools that the chief had mentioned that are actually in the city limits of Fargo. You've got Osgood Elementary, Independence, Willow Park Elementary, Deer Creek Elementary, and Meadowlark Elementary. One thing that we had identified is that if it is a West Fargo-owned school and there's a West Fargo school resource officer in there, we may not have had access to those buildings specifically in lockdown. So measures have been taken so that all officers in Fargo have means to get into all of those buildings. But again, in training, we know that maybe that might not work or disabled. So we do teach different techniques to get through a window or a door or whatnot. So they're trained to understand that if the door don't work, you make a door for yourself.
So just so I don't have that backwards, these are West Fargo schools, but they have Fargo SROs in them?
Nope. So these are West Fargo schools that are within the city limits of Fargo,
Okay,
and they have West Fargo school resource officers in them.
okay. Okay.
Yeah. I believe it has to do with the tax base way back when, before I was here.
Yeah, the school
I'm getting
district
nods
line.
from the audience too,
Yeah,
yes.
school district lines create that kind of bizarre situation, yeah.
Well, they're not old schools, some of them either though, right? Right, like Osgood and stuff
I have a
like that.
question. I was watching what happened in Georgia recently with the active shooter, and they have a system they put in place there that's like, kind of, what I understand, it works like the one that's in banks, like the teacher or principal or whoever, if there's an active shooter, can press something silently, and it goes out to the departments to let them know there's a active shooter in the building.
Like a
Are we-
panic button?
Yeah, something like that.
There is a lot of technology out there like that. That would be something that the school district would have to choose to deploy. We would work with them on that, obviously, because some of the issues are, while it is good technology, it can sometimes create the same issues as like the swatting call, because who pulls the alarm and who, initiates that. In the Georgia situation, though, I guess to their credit, they had SROs in the building, and the SROs were able to put that kid in custody. So they were already right there on premise, which is quicker than even the alarm would be. But yeah, you're right. There's other technology out there, 3D mapping, that we've suggested previously, but that would have to be more of an effort on the school district side. I think that's also some good technology that allows real-time 3D mapping and live streaming of like where people are and what they're doing. And I think that's something to look at in the future conversations with the school district.
Given the responsibilities of the SRO, I'm somewhat surprised that in your presentation, you show that there are certain schools that don't have SROs. Why is that? Especially, it seems like they have such a very important presence in the schools.
Well, here's the simple, we need more officers on the street. And so we've got staffing shortages there, and we would not put more people in the schools before we put more cops on the street. The school district has asked for adding SROs in one or two of the elementary buildings, but those are City of Fargo Police Department hires. Our priorities are to fill the existing needs of our department operations first before we would expand that SRO program. So it's an optional thing that we would have to agree to do.
So it's not a budgetary.
It is budgetary.
It is.
Yeah, it's budgetary. I mean, while the school district pays a good portion of that person, we pay the rest. We train them. They are a certified law enforcement officer. We're responsible for them, all of those things. So they are our person in the summer. Obviously, they're out on patrol doing things. So, yeah, it is budgetary from that perspective, and it's also prioritization of needs of the department and the safety of the community, which number one is addressing our staffing gap that we have.
You talked about the collaboration with all of the different law enforcement agencies. With the school resource officers, is there collaboration with West Fargo and Fargo? Do they do a lot of their training together, or are there connections there?
I wouldn't say they do all of their training together, but yeah, it's definitely something that they do train with them. They're a pretty tight-knit group of individuals. Like anybody would understand, high school issues or elementary, or I should say middle school issues, don't just stay in one school. You know, we have individuals that may travel for a basketball game to a different school, so they collaborate pretty well with that, and they train with each other in incidents such as that.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. Is there any other business?
I guess I had a question on kind of pivoting back to the street racing, and I think there's a meeting that the city had with some of our legislators. Was there any progress there that would help support your efforts to deter that?
I think so. We've been working pretty diligently on that to bring back to the legislative session the owner liability piece to address the cars that are fleeing from us, which is continuing to increase every year. And now that we got the traffic safety team, we have those boots out there that would be people that could work on those particular issues and follow up. So we're working with legislators on that. We believe we may have addressed some of the concerns that on the House side, that's where the bill didn't go through last time. We'll hopefully alleviate. We'll find out when January comes around, but we are actively working with legislators on that. And we've also addressed a group on the deficiencies in our fines, which is really goes towards a lack of any deterrence whatsoever. And some of the lowest fines we have are this dangerous driving, racing, and exhibition driving. And so we would need some state legislative help to make those infractions, which would allow a fine up to $1,000, and that would allow our municipal court judge to determine an appropriate fine. You know, if you're a first-time person versus this is the third time now, we need that kind of a deterrent factor. The owner liability bill would help us a lot with the cars that are fleeing from us in this same regard, because a lot of those vehicles that are fleeing, not all, but many, are the dangerous driving, the people blowing stop signs, the people blowing red lights, all these types of things that we want to try and address. But if the car doesn't stop, or we don't have some type of legal leverage to locate and identify that driver, you know, we're kind of out of luck.
Are you able to use, I know there are more cameras throughout the city. Are you able to use cameras and images to catch people yet?
Yeah, we will be using some of that flock camera technology that we've recently deployed to help with that, and that'll be another piece that'll be available to our traffic safety team. So absolutely, we're going to use any and all means. Our biggest deficiency was we were relying solely on our officers who are taking calls for service continually to fit in traffic stops if someone flees. They don't have time to do much else with that, and we didn't have any legal standing to do a lot more. The owner liability would help. Now that we've got the traffic safety team through the COPS grant, we've got a completely proactive group that's out there. They're not taking calls for service. They're out just doing traffic enforcement and public safety across the city, so they can concentrate on these dangerous driving individuals or groups. They can follow up on cars that flee a little more quickly and see if they can do something with that, although, you know, the legislative effort would help us a whole bunch in terms of providing us that leverage.
Are there legislative hurdles with your ability to use an image captured by a camera? Is there a hurdle there too?
A little bit, just in terms of you can't issue a ticket just off of a video, like you can't do a red light camera, or you can't just, if that's the plate, issue the ticket to the driver. We have to do either be able to identify the driver ourselves, or through investigation determine who the driver was before we could issue the citation.
That sounds cumbersome.
It is cumbersome, but that's North Dakota law. But you're right.
So if I blow through a toll plaza, if I'm driving through Chicago and I blow through a toll plaza somewhere, they're going to get me.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a ticket in the mail.
As the registered owner, you will get the ticket.
Yes. That we can't do that?
Not in North Dakota.
Okay. Okay.
Note to self.
But don't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Nothing else? This meeting of the Police Advisory and Oversight Board stands adjourned. Our next board meeting is scheduled for October 10th, 2024, with a location to be determined. Thank you.